Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the Passenger Standards Conference webinar this year. As you know, participation is encouraged, which is why we've done it on Teams this year, just because we hope that everybody is by now familiar with using Teams. So just where you know, just as a etiquette practice, please keep your microphone muted during the conference unless you wish to speak. And if you do wish to speak, please raise your hand so that we can address you. You can unmute, turn your camera on, say hi to everybody, and either ask your question or state your point. This is a recorded session, so IATA will be responsible for recording and sharing that recording after the event, so no need for you to do that yourselves. And on that note, I will be happy to introduce you to Nobu Yamanuchi, who is the chairman of the Passenger Standards Conference, Dave McEwen, who is the Passenger Standards Conference secretary, and our legal counsel, Julie Vandenbusch, who's also on the call today. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Nobu.
Hello, good afternoon and good morning and good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for joining yet another year of the PSC online. We did try to do it face-to-face, but unfortunately, due to the certain uncertainties we experienced and we weren't simply sure what the situation is. And I'm very happy that we don't seem to have as serious of an issue as we did in the past. And I hope that next year we can all meet face to face. So welcome and thank you for taking time to join the call today, because it is very important, and we'll be talking a lot about some of the restructuring things that you saw in agenda. The conference is for you all in the airline industry, and as I mentioned to everyone in the past, we do encourage everyone to participate. Natasha did put in some of the how you can put a comments or raise questions or anything. So please do use the opportunity to ask questions or make comments, etc. Because as I said, your participation is very important. Before I go further, I do like to, I would like to, and then I do need to hand over to Julie because there are some important legal issues that we need to be reminded of. So Julie, please.
Thank you, Nobu. So good day, everyone. My name is Julie Vandenbusch. I'm a member of IATA Legal, and I would like to remind you that the IATA Competition Guidelines apply to this webinar. So the guidelines state that certain types of agreements are prohibited. Thus, members of the conference cannot agree, for instance, on prices or charges for airline services, but also prices or charges to be paid to suppliers. And airlines cannot agree on the allocation of markets or customers, and they cannot collectively punish any business for exercising its independent business judgment. Similarly, the airlines cannot discuss or exchange information on issues such as individual rates, charge or surcharges, their individual costs, or their intentions to enter or exit certain routes. Example of the topics which shall not be discussed today can be found here on the slide, but you also have more details on the agenda on page 14 and 15. So I will attend the webinar and monitor the discussion, and if the exchanges are going in the direction they should not be heading to, then I will unmute myself and ask you to please go back to the agenda. Thank you very much, Nobu.
All right, thank you, Julie. To continue on with the agenda item A1 on the opening of the meeting, if I could ask Dave, our conference secretary, to give us a bit of the what the conference is structured of and some of the conference and the balloting topic. Dave?
Certainly, Nobu, and thank you. Allow me to add my welcome to everybody. The Passenger Services Conference is one of a number of conferences under the purview of the traffic conferences and reports directly to the annual general meeting. The structure of our conference is prescribed in Resolution 009, and the current structure of the boards you can see on the screen there. The Plan Board, shop order board, travel board, pay account board, architecture and technology, strategy board, as well as your steering group. And throughout this conference today, you will see presented the work items that have happened in 2022, some of which will be for voting, and the work plans for 2023. In the presentation material that you will see on your screen to help the understanding, you will see that there are two important parts to the material. First of all, there is the blue title slide, indicates what's coming and who would be the speaker. There's no decision required from the conference on those. And then there will be a yellow title slide that indicates that an item has been submitted for voting in the online voting platform SSW, which I believe Natasha was opened yesterday for the content that you will see today. I think that's it. The actual agenda itself is arranged as you can see here. For clarity, we've separated them out under each board. We're dealing right now with administration items. Each board will present their agenda in the manner that you see here, and there will be some general information items which will not be presented, but will do form part of the agenda, and we certainly encourage you to read those at your leisure. So you will see as we go through the agenda that each board has exactly the same structure. There are the blue cards, which will be the report of the board's activity. There will be a list of board members for endorsement. In some cases, there will be a request for delegation of authority. And then you'll see the groups under the boards, what the activities have been for the year, and the voting items.
All right.
So that's it for me for the moment.
Thank
you, Nobu.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Was there a message? I think there was a chat item. Natasha, can you?
Yes, I can see that. Richard Pearl saying that he's got an editorial suggestion for agenda item A5.1. If I may, Richard, can we bring that up during the agenda item A5.1?
Okay, thank you very much. So then we will move on to agenda item A2. Natasha does have some requirements on when it comes to online voting. So please, Natasha.
Yes, so the online voting, as Dave mentioned, was opened yesterday. Hopefully you all got a notification, at least the accredited reps. How it works, as I'm sure you're aware at the moment, the resolutions all you need a unanimous vote to pass. Recommended practices need 2/3 majority to pass, and all other conference decisions will pass by a simple majority. How we are running it this year, there's a participation question. So you would need to go in and accept that participation question so that we know that the quorum has been met for a voting item. You can, if you wish to vote yes on other items, go for it. But generally your yes vote in the participation question will indicate a yes vote across all other items, unless you specifically go into that item and vote no or abstain. For any no or abstentions, you do need to put in a comment so that this can be recorded. You would have until the 30th of December to vote, and you can change your vote as many times as you like up until this point. Basically, you log into the IATA customer portal. You would then from there click on SSW or the standard setting workspace, which is on your dashboard, and you'll be able to see the voting items under the passenger services conference voting items group. If you feel like you haven't got access to this group or you have some error, just contact us at standards@iata.org. If you've got any other questions, contact me there and I will definitely either help you, guide you, reset your access, whatever you need for that. On that one, back to you, Nobu.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we will move on to the next item, which is A3, approval of minutes. I think the content is self-explanatory. This is a yellow page, which means that it is subject to voting, Natasha, correct?
Correct, and the voting item number is reflected here. So you see the PSC 2022-A3, that is the same voting item that you will see in SSW.
Okay, then I'd like to open, are there any questions or comments for this item? going once, and I am looking at the chat screen. So if anybody raises hands, then I can see that. If there are no questions, then we will move on to A4 on the effectiveness question. That's the effectiveness to the amendment of industry standards, A4. Dave, are there any particularities to this? It's the standard, is it?
That's correct. The typical way that we've worked is that there's a general effectiveness date defaulted to the 1st of June 2023 for what we're doing now for any resolution and recommended practice, unless there is a different effectiveness date as mentioned in the item. As you know, we do have 4 voting cycles, so we do have the opportunity to declare a particular agenda item effective at one or other of those voting cycles, should it be deemed urgent enough for action. But in general, for the moment, we have a 1 June 2023 effectiveness date. Alternative effectiveness dates can be accommodated within the 4 cycles of voting.
All right. Are there any questions or comments to this? This is also a voting item, so if you have a question on this, then please raise your hand. No, if there's not, then we will move on to A5. Oh, it's me again speaking. So it will be the report of Passenger Standards Conference Steering Group, which I am also the chair of. So I'd like to report to you, and I'll make it as quickly as possible, because this is going to be a long meeting. So here are the members to the steering group. It is comprised of myself and the vice chair, James, from United. And we do have all of the chairs and vice chairs from all the boards represented in the steering group. I just like to make a note that we do have open vacancy on the Travel Standards Board. So if anybody's interested, then I would certainly appreciate another person from the conference participating. Our function is to work together with the management boards together and to steer what the activities of the conferences throughout the year and some of the cross-functional issues. And we also will try to administer and oversee the activities within each board and group to make sure that there is a coherence among them. Next page, please. So what we have been doing, we have met online and partially in Geneva. And one of the biggest topics that we have been discussing at the steering group is, of course, the evolution of the PSC, as you will see it in the agenda item 5.1. But we also have been discussing issues that's particularly related to currencies, especially the devaluation cases that we had, as well as some of the IATA clearinghouse issue and the new topics that's been brought up. And of course, we are the one that had to decide that this year is not going to be a face-to-face, but will be the online format. Yep. Are there any questions to the steering group?
Yes, hello, Frédéric Gonneau, Air France. For the evolution of this PSC and the work on resolution 009, is there an expected date for proposals and vote? Is it to be enforced more now in 2024, I guess?
Can we talk about that when we come to actual agenda item, because we do have a specific agenda item.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
Sorry, I said 5.1, but it's not 5.1. It's A9.1. So if we could address that. All right. Any other questions? Great. Then we'll move to 5.1.
Nobu, before you move on, I'm getting some chat that people are in a different link or they can't hear us. So I don't know, Natasha, if there's a separate link been sent to some people.
I see there's 4 other people, so I'm just manually adding them to this call, but I'll continue doing that on the side. Yeah.
Okay, fine, good. As long as you're on it, it's great. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Okay, good. Then I'd like to move on to 5.1. We do have the Interline working group that's been closely working with us under the steering group. Florian from British Airways is the head of the group, assisted by now the secretaries Dave and Marie. So Florian.
Yes. Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon, wherever you are. So just briefly from the Interline working group, Nogo already said. So as a recent development, our group was moved up from reporting into the plans standards board, directly reporting into the steering group, as our group mainly deals with the development or with of updated standards to facilitate interlining with offers and orders in the future, which would probably at some point touch more or less any resolution at least a little bit at some point. So that was a logical step also to be in line with the new setup that we will hear later about. As an update from our group, so we have just recently revised our terms of reference to be in line with that. Can we maybe move to the next slide? I still see. Okay, there it is. Great. So yes, I said we are reporting into the steering group now and have also revised the terms of reference, mainly updating them on an annual basis, but also focusing more on the interlining with offers and orders. So which covers mainly 3 focus areas. One is the interlining agreements framework, which is comprised mainly of the standard retailer supplier interline agreement. So what we call SURSIA, which will in the future facilitate all of this interlining, which will also replace at some point SPAs, as well as the meter or beta that carries with each other in one big retailing agreement. And there's also a voting item on this, as we have just recently updated recommended practice 17 ATS, which is the retailer supply interline agreement based on feedback that we got from the Legal Advisory Council. And do you want to cover this item directly, or should I maybe focus? Let's go back to the previous slide, please. And keep that for the end. That's the easy part. I just wanted to cover briefly kind of the focus areas that we have worked on in the last year, and that of course we continue working on, because the SURSIA development and also facilitating SURSIA in all the standards is a kind of a long-term project. So our areas of focus are just shifting slightly. Besides the SURSIA updates, the biggest part of work is discussions on business requirements that actually need to facilitate the interlining with offers and orders. So retailer-supplier relationships. Business requirements at the moment that we're working on is how to facilitate interline baggage under SURSIA, and also dealing with a potential setup of supplier product catalogs to make interlining with offers and orders easier. And there's a lot of other smaller items, and I'm happy to explain to you separately outside of this group if you're interested. And the third big part is our cooperation with the International Railway Union, so UIC, because the final goal actually should be to use SURSIA not only for replacing interlining between airlines, so airline to airline interlining, but also retailer supplier relationships with other modes of transport. And so we're currently working very close with the Railway Union to compare our new distribution standards to see how we can make them compatible to each other, or translatable into each other, that we can later facilitate also SURSIA between different modes of transport. And we will, of course, continue the work, especially on this part, over the next year as part of the revised TRRs. And that brings me to the voting item, which actually covers the SURSIA update I just mentioned a few minutes ago. the updates that we made on CERCIA, so recommended practice 1780S, are actually based on the comments from the Legal Advisory Council's Internal Modernization Task Force that we worked together over the last year, and the changes were, I think, provided already by you and put up for vote, and we hope we get your support on that. And please let me know in case you have any questions.
Yep.
There was one question
hang on one
from
second.
Richard.
Hang on one second. Did we sort out the access problem?
We're still working on it. Miriam is not. I've invited her to the call, and I don't know if she's there. Miriam, are you in the call? There's still two people stuck on the other call, which I can see on the screen below me. So we're working on bringing them into.
Okay, I just tried sending a link directly from here and try to invite people. So
I did, yeah, exactly the same.
Okay, so we have Teresa and Jana that's also trapped in outer space somewhere.
Jana from Croatia successfully joined on the phone.
Excellent.
Thank you for calling, Natasha. Yeah.
Okay, so that one worked. I'll do the same with the others.
Richard, you have a question. Richard Pearl?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can
Yeah,
hear
hi.
you.
Okay, great. Thank you and good day to everyone. Just a clarification, has the name of the agreement now changed to Standard Retailer Supplier Interline without the and?
That's actually a good question, and no, the name of the agreement has not changed. That was a mistake.
Okay,
it was just noticed the beginning of this week that the end was missing in one of the items, or in one of the sentences where it was mentioned. I believe it mainly comes from that, because when you just speak about it, Standard Retailer Supplier Interline, it's just quicker, and also the end is not represented in the abbreviation. But that was an oversight. That's definitely not an intentional change.
No worries. Thank you.
Sorry for the confusion.
No worries.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, if it's not, then this is the voting item, and please don't forget to vote for this. And we will move on to the next item, which is A6.
Right? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, tax fees and codes. For that, I'd like to ask Dave.
Thank you. Agenda item A6 that you have is related to the IATA Ticket Tax Box service, who are responsible for allocating the codes and publishing new taxes, fees and charges codes based on regulation and airport authority. All of the activities since the last ratification is published as an attachment to A6. You are invited to vote in the online ballot to ratify the activities of the TTBS for the past 12 months. That's it.
Sorry, I'm just having a bit of a difficulty here myself. Yeah, so sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry.
So just saying the agenda item stands for voting as it is, no further explanation unless there's any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, then we'll move on to A7. And once again, Dave and Tony, please.
Yes, you receive every year a status of the current availability of our industry coding activities and designator depletion. Mr. Tony Pietrangelo, who manages this activity on behalf of the industry, is with us, and he'll take us through the slides that are here. Tony?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Hello, everyone. So we just wanted to give you a quick update on the status of inventory of airline codes and in the three main categories, IATA designator codes, accounting and prefix, and location identifiers. But also, more importantly, on the next slides, to stress, an urgency item in terms of the depletion of codes for the designators. Now, if you just want to go back to the first slide, Natasha, please. So I just want to highlight first on the codes inventory status for the designator codes. I want to highlight that although we have 192 codes available from the 1,196 available codes of inventory, if it wasn't for the use of controlled duplicates, which the resolutions currently allow, where we can assign a controlled duplicate code to a non-scheduled airline, and the same code is assigned to a scheduled airline. We also try to assign those codes to airlines in different geographical locations. So the use of those controlled duplicates has been in the resolutions for years. We have currently over 200 duplicate codes issued, and 192 primary codes available. So doing the math there, if it was not for the use of controlled duplicates, our IATA designator code inventory would have been depleted already. And we're going to show in the next slide how that controlled duplicates is causing an issue. But just jumping to, the accounting codes inventory, we have 114 codes out of 999 available. That is also becoming a concern, but a bit more controlled, we would say. We're monitoring it just because there's a less burn per year than the designator codes. On location identifiers, the so-called airport codes, we still have healthy levels with 6,000 codes available. But this is also being monitored by the industry coding group because we do have now the new topic of urban airports for the electric vertical takeoff vehicles. This is starting, and if airlines bring this to commercial status in the years to come, there's going to be an increased need for urban airports, which have to be identified. So the question is, do we identify these new airports with a current IATA location identifier, or will we have another coding regime? So that's to be monitored. But going to the next slide, Natasha, thanks. Really what we want to highlight here today is a designator code depletion issue. Why the concern is because, again, although we do have 192 codes available per the previous table, and if I just jump to that table at the bottom of this slide, just doing a bit of an analysis, out of those 192 codes, we only have 79 codes that are really completely free, that have not been assigned either in their primary status or controlled duplicate status. Out of those 79, if we take out designator codes that start with zeros, or O's, then we take out another 18. So in theory, if we're trying to take really a conservative approach, we have 61 codes, designator codes that are completely free that can be assigned by IATA without currently having any issue. And the reason why we raise this and we want to start looking at this figure of 61 more closely is because the operations team that I lead that manage the day-to-day coding operations, applications from airlines, meeting requirements, we're assigning codes, recalling codes. The team is having a much more difficult time in assigning codes that would not create a conflict down the line. Even with current assignments of codes, we have more and more conflicts that the duplicate codes are creating. So we would love to stay away from the issuance of duplicate codes, but currently the process, and as per resolutions, when an airline is non-scheduled, we issue them a duplicate code. When an airline is scheduled, we issue them a primary designator code. So from a scheduling perspective, overall, this is kind of under control. The problem is that designators, have a further reach than just in the scheduling space, right? For example, I have here on the slide, they're used in airport operations, flight communications, and also various, government agencies for advanced passenger information, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we're seeing more and more conflicts. Although from a scheduling perspective, we're saying, well, the duplicate code will not, have a conflict with its primary version. But in the operational side of the codes, airports, flight communications, there is more and more conflicts. And that's why it's becoming more difficult to actually assign these codes that will not cause a conflict. So that's why the 61 is kind of a number we're, trying to look at from a more conservative side. And that's why the alert has been risen, and we'd like to look at what potential solutions there are to manage this in the near future. So on the last slide, basically, thanks, Natasha. So we have, again, if we look at really a conservative approach of just trying to use those codes, those 61 codes that would not cause a conflict, at least in the short term, we kind of estimate here that we probably have 3 to 4 years before designator code inventory depletion. And just to give you some numbers, I think it's in the agenda item, we can, on average, we have anywhere from 15 to 25 net new codes being assigned by IATA every year. However, that's a bit scarier because in terms of really new assignments of codes, in a given year, we probably have 75, like so far this year, we have 80 new codes, designator codes that have been assigned. However, we have a natural hedge in terms of codes that are being recalled, right? So there's a natural recall of codes, either because airlines no longer meet the requirements or they're stopping operations. So that net burn of codes is anywhere, from 20 to 25. And that's why we have the 3 to 4 year estimate here. We've been looking with the industry coding group under the Plan Standards Board. We've been looking at possible options that we can use maybe to manage this depletion issue. So we have 2 items that were kind of raised this year in the sessions we had with the industry coding group. There's, if I start with point number 2, the 3-character IATA designator, this is already allowed in our coding resolutions. In short, the resolutions would say that if IATA no longer has any 2-character designators, we can issue, in the meantime, a 3-character designator for new airlines. So it would kind of be a hybrid type of solution where existing airlines have the 2-letter designator, new airlines would have the 3-character designator. That probably was seen as being a bit more disruptive. The other option maybe would be a 2-numeric IATA designator, so numeric, which would give us approximately 80 new codes. So we've been looking at these options, and before we continue with further research there, we wanted to raise this item to the PSC to get your feedback and also agree on a plan to address this urgent issue, which we think is quite urgent given the time we need to react to make any adjustment to our current coding regime. Dave, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else to that.
Nothing more to add from my side. It's a very succinct summary.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Just a question, if you're soliciting inputs, should that be channeled through the coding working group, or can any airline make a comments directly in the email, or how would you like to have that?
Well, I mean, we could take some quick comments today, but yeah, definitely if it go through the coding group, that would be, I think, a good way to consolidate all the input. I guess from our side, from the coding group, what we had agreed to in a preliminary stage is really to start going out to contact certain stakeholders to see how difficult or how much time would be needed to maybe implement a solution like a 2-numeric designator code based on a system basis. But before we went out to external stakeholders, including other airlines, of course, because some of these numeric designators, if we go that way, would also be in some of your systems, some of the existing airline systems, because maybe some of your partners, some of your low-cost carriers may be issued a 2 numeric designator in the future if we go with the solution shown in point 1. So before we go out and maybe survey some of the external stakeholders, we want to get some feedback even at the PSC level, because again, it's a bit of a disruptive matter, because there's so much, interconnections, not just from a coding perspective, but just other downstream systems and including flight numbers, right?
Yeah, I understand. I think the PSS may have a difficulty in that. To the conference, any spontaneous questions, comments right now on this topic?
Maybe for Air France here, what we see also is a growth of requests for train stations in the interline agreements. So not only the eVTOLs, but also the trains. And we have to make a limit one day on that also.
Yeah, no, definitely. Of course, as we have currently, any type of location that is used for intermodal, as long as it's requested from the airline, right? We're not going to give the location code if requested by a railway, but if it is requested by an airline, because it is being used in an intermodal journey, yes, we are giving railway stations, bus stations, a location code. We are seeing a spike in requests from railways. However, the way we're managing that is definitely the request based on resolutions has to come from an airline. So often when we mention this to the railway station or other non-airline requester, I guess the demand is being controlled that way because it has to come from an airline. And so it's a bit surprising for us because when we do say that, sometimes the railway company goes away, it doesn't come back requesting a code. So maybe it is being used only for their internal purposes, but from our side, these are airline codes and the request has to come from an airline. But we are monitoring that also, definitely. That's besides the urban airports, the increasing, use of intermodal interlining is definitely playing a role on location identifiers.
Okay. Does anybody have a question? Use the reactions, the raise hand function. Thomas.
Yes, so actually, I mean, the 2 numeric IATA codes would give us like 99 new codes, right? So looking at the burn rate, that's going to help for 4 more years, and that's it basically. So
correct.
Not really a big deal, right? The 3 character, I think it's basically a good plan because it's already existing in the manual. It's already defined for scheduling. I guess one of the biggest challenges would be the handling of the ICAO codes, which already are there for airlines, right? So if you don't have an airline with a 2 and a 3-letter IATA code, which you could not make possible because then you win nothing, it would be difficult as airlines have 3-letter ICAO codes and some other airlines would have the 3-letter IATA code. Tricky thing, right? But actually maybe the only option to go forward. Yeah. So
yeah, Thomas, yeah, we may, I mean, if it goes down that route, again, I guess a logical solution can be to align the IATA, the new IATA 3-letter designator to the ICAO 3-letter designator.
That may be one of the things. So I think it's a lot of marketing, strategic, people things, not so much technological, a lot of people things, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yuranka?
Yeah. Hi, this is Michael from Qatar Airways. Thank you. I have a quick question regarding the airline design network codes. Are you considering anything also with the challenge of 4-digit flight numbers? I believe that many airlines are struggling with the issue that they're exhausting the flight numbers, the range. I think there was something planned in the past to extend it to 5 digits. Or are you planning anything here to support the industry? I'm just curious to understand this.
Yeah. So that's not a topic on my area of specialty. Dave, did you want to comment on that?
Glenn's got his
flight
hand up.
number.
He can answer that.
Glenn.
From the...
Oh, okay.
Thanks. This is, I mean, lines up with what my comment was going to be is, seeing the need for addressing the code depletions is right there along with flight number exhaustion. After we did an extensive review of how we were going to try to attack this, looking at the directives of IATA and the steering group as it relates to retailing and offer order, it looked like that the cost associated with doing some of the obvious things, such as a 5-digit alphanumerics, was going to outweigh the potential benefits. So at the moment, we're not really looking at just directly addressing the structure of a flight number to say alphanumerics or 5 digits. Within the PSB and the publication working groups, we are looking at some concepts to say leverage some of the issues like the interline, maybe looking at some potential to develop an enhanced interline that could provide enhanced interline displays and lessen the need for code share numbers. Because as we're looking forward, some of the visions of the interline groups in the NDC retailing seems to assume a natural move away from code share as it's not needed anymore. So we're right in the middle of an odd thing with all of these codes of what do we need today to continue business as usual, and what are we going to need in the future, and what's going to be the cost resources needed to achieve something over the next 3 or 4 years that may just be throwaway code. And I think you're going to look at this, given the direction we've been given from IATA, to focus resources on NDC, shopping, and retailing over some of the other legacy codes. It may be difficult to generate a lot of effort into making the updates for the 3-character designators, the flight exhaustion. So we're trying to look and see if we could hit some of the low-hanging fruit that could get us to the future. But we do need to make sure that we are able to continue the business as is needed today and not just assume that we're going to have that snap cutover in 5 or 6 years. So we are still trying to look forward, and we're always looking for other options. We'll take any considerations, but the short answer to your question is there's nothing on the drawing boards right now to say move forward with, say, a 5-digit number.
Okay, Florian.
Yes, just briefly, because you brought it up. So I mentioned earlier, we are in the Interline Working Group. We are talking with UIC on how to actually do retailer supplier relationships in the future with intermodal partners, especially railway operators. And we have identified a number of fields where we need to work on and what we need to discuss to actually facilitate this in the future. And definitely this is one of the topics that already came up as a field of discussion, like service designators as well as location identifiers, because just a brief example, in Germany, for example, there are over 5,000 stations. We could not even assign in IATA code even if we wanted. So there needs to be a solution to use other logics and to use them in the airline distribution system. So I think that will be definitely one of the core discussions we need to have, and also to involve some experts. So Tony and Glenn, if you're kind of more familiar with these topics already and have some ideas on that, I would of course like to invite you to join us in these discussions.
Glenn.
Okay, sorry. And I'll give back some of my time later because it hits on a lot of the points that I had. Especially since we have a wide group here, as we look at things, as they're looking at the enhanced interline, and we're looking at moving away from code share if possible. We need to start thinking about things like interline marriage and interline journey control, things that maybe are out there on the fringes, but they'll be a key part of how we do business in the future if we start moving more to interlines. So I don't know if a lot of it is we're really focused on thinking about that as part of how we sell, as we're looking at the offer orders, but these are things we're going to have to really get in front of to really help along the way with mitigating our flight exhaustion issues and some of our coding issues.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what we will do then is to refer this back to the coding group, and perhaps have the discussion and report back to the conference what may be the option and solicit further inputs. I think that will be the best thing to do, because I think it might be a bit difficult taking up more discussions here. And I'm not sure if all the relevant and qualified people are here from each of the airlines. Is that all right?
Yes, thank you. We basically want to highlight this also at the PSC level today, but we will continue working on that. Thank you.
All right. Good. So, and then for the conference airlines, if you do have questions or if you do have comments and you do not participate directly into the coding, I think Natasha will provide the general email address later to which you can also write, or you can have your specialist colleagues write to them for any questions and concerns. All right. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tony. All right, and then we will move on to the next item, which is A8 and the BSP form codes. Dave, if you...
Yes, thank you, Nobu. Historically, every year, conference has asked for a status of where we are with BSP form codes for the allocation of neutral off-premise electronic tickets and neutral off-premise electronic miscellaneous documents. Here you can see the latest graph. There is a lot more detailed information in the agenda item proper, but I would like to focus on the conclusions of the activity, and that is for off-premise electronic tickets. We have allocations, sufficient numbers together with the recycling that we perform to assure a supply of electronic tickets, given current economic forecasts and notwithstanding the hiccup that we've had with the COVID-19 pandemic. Will take us to February 2031. We've already factored in the economic forecast projections, and that actually implies that it is 4 years less than last year's forecast. So it's already come down to 2031. However, where I would like to focus conference's attention is on the supply of the off-premise electronic miscellaneous documents. You can see from the graph on the right-hand side that the availability of serial number allocations is only assured until January 2024, which basically means if we do nothing, we will run out of the ability to allocate IATA BSP off-premise electronic miscellaneous documents by the end of 2023. Now, we need to do something about it. You will be aware that we actually have a number of different groups who have form codes allocated. We refer to them as the source of sale. We have ARC for the Area Settlement Plan in the United States. We have IATA's own billing and settlement plan in the rest of the world, so that's a neutral side for agents, but we also have airline dedicated stock. And in addition, we have a number of form codes allocated to TCH, that's the Transport Clearinghouse, which is a settlement system in Russia. Last year, conference allocated a number of form codes to the newly formed settlement system in China, CATA. CATA already have come back to us and asked for the allocation of more form codes for them to use as they so choose. They don't define them, in largely for the big domestic market in China. Now, when I look at RP 1720 attachment A, where we document the form codes, I have really only one form code left, which is form code 19, which gives 100 million. And there are a number of various derivatives of that we could slice and dice, 196, 197, 194. There are a couple of other form codes that potentially are expiring that we could reallocate for EMDs, 291, 450. And there are some other kind of things that we could look at to assign EMDs. But all that to say, we have to do something to unlock more volumes of EMD form codes for IATA BSP, and we have to do it urgently. So what I would like to suggest, if I may, Nobu, given the urgency on the UP EMD side and the requirements that we've received from CATA, is if I pass this on to my colleague Ian Badia to refer this to the ticket working group to look at a possible strategy to unlock at least 10, 20, 30 million electronic miscellaneous document tickets, or at least one or two form codes that would push the requirement out at least to 2030. So at least we can manage it more on recycling rather than allocation. But as you can see, the numbers are forecasted to go exponentially higher, and we're at critical stage with EMDs right now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, Dave. What you suggest sounds very logical. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Please raise your hand under the reactions button. Nothing? Okay, if there is no questions or no comments, then Dave, I would follow your suggestion and ask the ticketing group to have a look into this, because we certainly want to make sure that we have enough EMDs.
Exactly. One of the other things that I'm going to ask them to do, with your permission, and by that I mean our conference, is if we can't unlock form codes, then we may have to start contacting other sources of sale to do some trades. In other words, swap the source of sale. So, for example, I might have to ask airlines to give up a form code, or ARC to give up a form code, for example. So there's a couple of things that we can look at. Whether that's possible or feasible, I don't know, but those are the two options that we can look at.
Okay, and then I see in the chat that Margaret, as a chair of the ticketing group, has already said happy to take on this item. So thank you very much, Margaret, and I hope that you will find something. All right, are there any other questions, comments on this topic? Okay, then if it's not, then we will move on to the next topic, which are changes, plural, to Resolution 9 and other administrative items. So that will be, Dave, can you lead us on to that?
Yeah, certainly. And just to avoid any confusion, clearly we have a big topic, the evolution of 009, which Nobu, you're going to lead us through. But as a result of other industry action, particularly with the rescission of some resolutions, 009, which is the repository of all of the resolution text, the attachment A and B, needs some editorial and administrative updates, which are shown in the package of items for voting. So that's all this item is about.
Okay, Dave, can you just mention for those who didn't, what was the resolution 791?
That's a good question. I need to check.
Okay.
I will though, just a minute. I'll put it in the chat when I find it.
All right, so that people, So thank you. So that will be the voting item, and you do have until 30th of December to vote on this package. Then we'll move on to 9.1, which is the PSC evolution, and which I and Dave will walk through. So Natasha, I'm going to keep it relatively short because this is something that we've already done a webinar on, and I'm sure many of you have either been in the webinar or had the pleasure of looking at me on the recording. I don't look at it myself. I don't look at the recording myself, so I don't know how it is to look at it. But when we started discussing the Resolution 9, the driver of this is that the current PSC setup was created back in 2016, 2017. And of course, we have quite a bit of development that we've been able to implement and move on in the new distribution, as well as some of the industry environment have changed quite a bit. And we felt that it was the time, just like every one of our airlines and companies have reorganized, we thought it would be a good opportunity to address some of the changes in the industry, as well as some of the deficiencies that we have seen to make the process and working together a lot easier. And in order to do that, we wanted to make sure, Natasha, next page. We wanted to make sure that there were certain elements that all of us in the steering group have thought was absolutely a requirement. And these are the 4 items. Number 1 is to make sure that the new setup and new process does encourage additional airlines to participate and take a part in the whole journey together. And the second one is to make sure that we have the business continuity, because there was some conversation that was heard, oh yes, we're going to stop doing all the legacy things, or working groups is going to be disbanded, that's not related to NDC, etc. To which all of the airlines in the PSC steering group have said, no, we want to make sure that we continue, we can ensure the business continuity. And then the third dimension is that we have often talked about what the future should be as a vision, but now it's the time where we absolutely need to make sure that we provide to the entire industry, to all of you, that we can provide a concrete transformation path to say, we're going to achieve this, and this is what we need to get to the next step. And lastly, we've also noticed that we did not have equal development in the different pillars. For example, we felt that SOSB, the shop order board, may be a lot ahead of some of the other functions when it comes to the distribution and NDC topic. And we wanted to make sure that in order for us to implement a future vision, we have to ensure that all of us are at the same level, because we won't be able to implement as long as the development is not equal. The next page. That's why we have discussed there are many ways of reorganizing. I'm sure you have the same discussion within your company, within your airline. There are sometimes no perfect way of doing it, but after months and months of discussion, the steering group members have agreed that we will slice and dice and reorganize something slightly differently. And we will retain the 5 board structure, but it will be divided slightly differently. And we will also have a functions to make sure that the cross-board working groups or cross-board relationship and working will be improved substantially, is the whole idea. Next page. As I said, the key changes that everyone sees is that we have moved shop or offer part into together with planned standards board. So what we used to have as a shop order is now separated into two different boards. We're also looking to see a greater collaboration amongst the boards, across the boards, to make sure that we can reach an equal development, because that is the prerequisite for having a implementation. We also noticed that we do need to manage the working groups better for resource questions, airline participation questions, and we're asking the board to have the management of the working group by clearly defining what the terms of the working group is and the goal of the working group. And in order to facilitate, as a fourth point, in order to facilitate the technical support as well as some of the technical cross-board issues, we are asking we are creating the technical support working group, which is also supported by the ATSB in order to make sure that we have the technical standards that are across the board and consistent within the entire industry. Those are the major changes we have in Reso 9. I think we had a, can we move to the next? Yeah, so we have changed the name. We have added certain functions that came new. And I think, but the structure is exactly as, structure remained as exactly as we had discussed in the webinar. And yeah. And we will also have, as I mentioned, we will also have some of the support groups that are technology standards, or we will have the additional function, let's say, at the steering group to make sure that working group resources are prioritized, or to make sure that we do have a balanced development, or if there are any conflicts, then the steering group is there to make sure that we adjust and we coordinate properly. Before we go into the next step and talk actually about the steps, are there any questions to the concept or changes? If you could raise your hand. Nope. Okay, so if there are no questions or comments on that part, then I will move on to what actually happens on the next step. Natasha, would you mind jumping in and explaining the timing?
Sure. So basically the target dates, as you see on the screen, will be this cycle now, which is 30th of November to the 30th of December for the ballot. So granted that this item passes, in January we will be going forward with a regular call for board nominations and finalizing the board membership. So this would also be covered again in each board, because normally we would endorse the board for another 12 months. And what we're doing is endorsing the board up to this transition period, which is the 1st of July 2023. Following the board approval, the boards will then be working on the terms of references and deciding which working groups fall into which board activities. And those would be finalized come March 2023, where we will call for the group nominations and hopefully finalize all those groups by June 2023, with the structure being fully functional by the 1st of July 2023.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. So we will have the new board starting, but we will have the transition period, and to make sure that we continue with all the groups under the board, and then the new board will assist with redefining or handling of the existing groups. So if there had been an impression that we're going to disband all of the legacy groups, no, that's not going to be the case. And we're going to make sure that all business essential topics will continue to be handled and addressed. Yep, next page. So what are What are our foundations? So we will have the boards and the groups, and we will publish all of the calendars and places to make sure that if you're involved in multiple groups activities, then we will have a clear transition and make sure that if you're involved in two different areas, that's not going to happen simultaneously. We will also, under the steering group, we may have a group that are covered under multiple boards in order to encourage and make sure to address topics that are related to not just one board topic, but multiple boards. And we will also have the strategic partnership program that we have been having, because I think some of the boards had dealt with external groups differently than the other. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and Nobu, if I can just add, for people that are concerned that somehow it looks like we are breaking things up and segregating conversations and building lots of new groups, it is not the case. As you say, the ability to continue to have conversations around offers and orders will still be there, but it's really about having specific segregation of topics related to one or the other, identifying the multidisciplinary topics and bringing those together, and separating out the business requirements, which is the what airlines want to achieve, from the solutioning at the technology level, which is the how we will achieve it. And we're not going to be having one meeting in Montreal 1 week and then the next meeting in Singapore the week after. We're going to try and publish as much in advance all of the meetings so everybody can plan appropriately. Co-locating different types of activities is going to hopefully lead to a much more agile governance with focused conversations and agendas. And the contributor model that you see there is basically built around managing resources in a manner that we can have volunteers working on, like a project mindset, to address a particular topic. And one of those, the first ones that will look at that is the product catalog that was recently endorsed under the Plan Standards Board, where we've already identified some key individuals, both within IATA, not necessarily in the standards team, but within IATA and externally, to support that activity. And as always, to any meeting, we can invite observers as needed. And one other aspect of this that often comes up is, so what's happening with this payment? And the idea, of course, is that for financial processes, which live in the financial, we'll sometimes call colloquially the back office, they will continue to be overseen by the new board that's currently managing the financial standards. But there is also an increasing awareness that payment is becoming equally much more an element of commercial strategy, enabling new forms of payment as an example, and that would come under the new board dealing with distribution. So we're not forgetting any aspects of the financial areas at all. In fact, we are enhancing it by giving the opportunity to have focused conversations on payment and distribution, as well as the other aspects of payment processes, such as acquiring and financial recognition.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I just like to take this opportunity and remind everyone, all airlines, all members are free to participate in the board meeting. So you do not have to be one of the 18 members to participate into the board. And I would actually encourage as many airlines and many members as possible to join and participate and make comments, learn, take the opportunity to voice and contribute your thoughts, because that's very, very important. We want to move forward as an industry, and we do invite, and you do have an opportunity to come join all of the board activities and discussions. Yeah. So, any questions, comments? I think Frederick, you had a question. Is that? Oh no, I see it in the chat. Is it covered? Right. Anyone else? If not, Natasha, we did have somebody had a comment on the A9 series, didn't we? I think it was Richard, was it?
No, his comment was on A5.
A5, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. If not, Dave, would you mention the voting item A91?
Is it on the next slide, Dan?
Yeah.
So this clearly is an important voting item. A91 sets the strategic direction and framework of our activities going forward to be reflective of the industry current ambitions and business strategic priorities. You can see a high-level summary in front of you there. This is a voting item in the package as presented.
Okay. If no one has a questions, then we will move to the next item. A10, A11. I think any other business and date and place of the next meeting, I think we can move that to the end. I think
we traditionally do this at the end of the meeting. We can move on for now. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Then what I would like to do is to move on to the B series, which is the items from Plant Standard Boards. And for that, I would ask Glenn and Sandra and Isabella to take the lead. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for everybody's time. I'll try to go through these, maybe get us back, pick up a couple of minutes along the way as we spoke about some of the topics we'll be discussing along the way. Okay, going through our overview of the Plant Standards Board. They've been focused, and we'll be talking a little today about the board restructure and the PSC evolution. We'll be working on building the standard setting framework for the future of industry. How do we reach our goals for the future while maintaining continuity today? How are we going to maintain our resource allocation, prioritization of activities and industry objectives? We'll be working on promoting cross-board engagement and transition. What is going to be our pathway from today's environment to the future environment of retailing, shop order, etc.? We'll be working on the board restructure, new memberships, new group structures, new terms of reference. We'll be focusing on review of our resolutions, recommended practices under the boards. A lot of our focus will be on digital identity and industry codes, which we've heard a lot earlier today. We'll be working on with some new groups, some new efforts around airline product management, focusing on the evolving scheduling practices and slot standards, continuing evolutions of airport MCTs, whether it be from the perspective of minimum connect times, logistics of new airports, how we're connecting, to whether you want to call it a marketing connect time on how airlines flow their traffic across their own systems and connect with other carriers. We'll be looking at streamlining the schedule reference data and airline codes through the API, increasing access to the data across various work entities within companies to make sure that we can best support the development of new initiatives, and migration of slots and schedules MCT data to the AIDM. And Isabella, Sander, anytime if you have any additional comments, feel free to jump in. So,
Will do.
Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, part of the work that we've been doing within the airport slots group is updating the recommended practices 1761A. There was a lot of work going into this year, gaining slot relief measures for the northern summer and northern winter seasons. Also, a lot of focus with the slot policies in general, done by our World Airport Slot Board and Guidelines Group. They put a lot of work into maintaining all of the efforts, the standards, different policies related to how our slots are managed and obtained.
Yes, it's
Okay.
certainly a collaborative effort between both boards, the slot board and the plan standards board.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. We do have a couple of items that will be on the online ballots for voting this year. The first part is going to be the endorsement of the PSB members. Our PSB members get renominated for each election period, get the endorsement of the elections for the plan of the standards board, and we wish for the conference to endorse the continuation of the board until the transition for the agenda A9.1, where we'll be continuing our under the role of just a basic plan standards board as we move into the plan offer board in mid-2023. Next slide, please. The next online ballot item is going to be our annual delegation of authority to the PSB. What this does allow is for the PSB and some of the work groups to, under them, to do business as usual work, make updates throughout the year as business needs require related to schedule publications, slot coordinations, whether it be formats, procedures, messaging standards, updates to minimum connect time formats, or schemas, implementation guides. Your business as usual daily work that we can get out into the market faster to help support the needs of the airlines, different entities that are looking for specific updates, changes. So, okay. So that'll, okay. Okay, now we have multiple groups under the PSB, similar to the overall governance structure. The PSB will fall under the Plan Standards Conference as one of the 5 boards. We will, this year, we still have 5 groups under the board. We have our industry coding group. The Interline group will be moving under the steering group as previously announced. The schedule publication group, previously under the what some people may know as the SIS group, which establishes publication standards. Working with them, the SDX working group. You have the slot messaging group with the SlotX working group. Your minimum connect time group, again with your minimum connect time X working group. We'll be taking on a new group, the airline product management group, which will be coming on, and we'll be working with them to develop their new terms of reference and topics and efforts they will be taking care of in 2023. Okay, one quick, Natasha, as I wanted to note that we previously had a flight number industry codes exhaustion group based off some of the discussions and efforts coming out of there. That group was dissolved as we will continue to focus on the shopping retailing initiatives, which would make the basic expansion of flight numbers, sort of throwaway code, very expensive initiative. So we decided to put that on the side at the moment, but we will still monitor the situation through the coding group for any needs, as we talked about, working any low-hanging fruit that we can try to mitigate any issues. Thank you. Okay. On the work plan of the industry coding group, they have multiple initiatives going on. We're currently working on new and evolving industry coding and regimes, especially as Tony mentioned, the urban air mobility, which has the potential to place a great strain on coding requirements, whether it be potentially carriers, equipment types, locations that will be served. We'll continue to be focused on the limitations inventory of deletions, designators, airline locations. I'll support the digital identity management, moving away from analog coding. That will be one of the focuses across the plan standards boards, as working with the digital identity management on how we sell, who's selling, how are the offers getting out there. So there'll be a lot of activity there. Streamlining the code, securing other reference data, open APIs. Again, as we mentioned, validating duplicate designators for carriers, non-filed, non-scheduled versus scheduled, and stopping the issuance of fictitious and offline points. As we're looking for ways to continually try to get to the future without exhausting all of the codes today, because we just really don't know exactly what the landscape is going to look like in the future, but we want to be prepared. Look at the continuity. How do we transition to the new environment? Okay. Out of the coding group comes one of our voting items, which is going to be the recall of airline designators and accounting codes. This will be your online ballot. And this will provide provisions for the coding group and how airline designators are recalled, put back into circulation. You can see the details here. We won't go into all of the details, but this will be out there on the ballot for you. Again, hopefully this will give us a little bit of leeway to avoid some of the exhaustion issues. Okay. The next item is going to be on subsidiary cargo companies online ballot item. This was going to make provisions for carriers such as cargo companies and airlines that may have a single ownership, but they may need different codes for their cargo and their airline operations. So that will be another voting item for you. Moving on to the minimum connect time. Some of the recent developments under the MCT work group. Effective November, the group was able to implement a connection building filter record, which was data built into the current MCT records that are filed through OAG and Cerium. What this does is allow carriers to better control their connectivity with other carriers, reduces dependencies on some of the other filing data, such as global suppressions, which in turn improve the processing efficiencies of systems such as the GDSs and host systems on how connections are actually being built. We're in the cutover period now between where we have some of the processes that are out there running in parallel, but this is available for carriers to use. If anybody has questions on them, feel free to reach out to your MCC standards, your MCT rep, and we can look at how these might be able to help you. Some of the priorities going forward is going to be the addressing concurrences with removal suppressions. This is how we're going to migrate the data, allow people from moving from a suppression model to a connection building filter of who you want to build connections with. But this will help streamline some of our connection buildings in your systems to help ensure connections that are building are going to be connections that can be ticketed, in turn reducing cell failures, improving the customer experience. Okay. Groups are working on a neutral source of MCT station standards, trying to streamline the number of exceptions that are out there, working with airports that may not have airport standards set up or may have them out of line with the way the airports operate today. We'll be looking at MCT education, as we have many, many new people in the industry, on helping people understand how MCTs are applied, how they work, how they can best be filed or cleaned up, and looking to the future of exactly how should MCTs be applied in the future. Are there ways to build connections based off of time of day, day of week, to optimize your schedule to better reflect how operations flow through your airports during the day? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Our next group is the schedule publication group. Some of the developments there, we were able to, based off some of the lessons learned with COVID, look at information on transmission of passenger health data, how to pass that type of information through on your schedule files. We looked at traffic restrictions on how schedules build versus how schedules price versus what traffic rights that you actually have to move passengers. So we're looking at that. We've closed it down for the moment, but we're always reviewing based off of airlines' needs on the way schedules are building versus how they're constructed in a SIM file. Working on API data code transmissions, working with the scheduled data exchange on schema deliveries. And we have ongoing reviews from internal groups, always looking at aircraft, terminal watch list, any airport projects, new notifications, maintaining UTC times as DSTs, region service codes, and a lot of focus now on the new electric types aircraft. We have aircraft going out there. We're trying to be very generic with them at the moment, but we do have codes available as people watch them or maybe want to bring them into the network. As the product evolves, maybe we'll be adapting those types of aircraft types into the need based off of increasing, changing, modifying as needed. Okay. Our priorities going forward is going to be the evolution of scheduling practices with the airline retail. How do we sell today? How do we want to sell in the future? And how can we support the move to the retail offers and orders? How can we make a smooth transition while ensuring business as usual, nothing gets broken along the way? We'll look at things like interline schedule displays and concept. How can we maybe leverage interline as a way to avoid flight number exhaustion? We'll be focusing on our AIDM migration, how we communicate schedules with airports, some work that we're doing with slots, how to not only airports, but any other entities that may be consuming schedules, airline schedules, intermodal schedules, what type of formats will be used with that. And looking at the definition of data elements used for bilateral purposes. These data elements they talk about provide information about the flight, what type of information that you would like to be able to provide in a schedule to the consumers of the data to get your message out about your product or information such as the passenger health data. And then streamlining scheduling reference data with other source codes. Okay. Next slide, please. The work plan of the slot messaging group, their developments and priorities, provisions of waitlist information to operators, confirming flight slots for requested aircraft towers made effective as part of the SIM data. They've worked on justifying the non-use of slots in force majeure referencing for temporary capacity reductions, removal of type codes. They've been looking at pursuing requirements for the electric vehicles. You can see a lot of activity on the publication, the schedule side around the new electric vehicles and new service that this could bring on. and communication of defined scheduled data for non-level 2 or 3 airports. So again, how we're working with the airports or other entities to provide schedule data. And that's an ongoing effort between the slot messaging group and the schedule publications group, which we've been working with for a while. So they're continuing their migration of slot messages to the industry data model, working on open APIs, transmission of scheduling codes, and the slot data exchange working group working on slot data related schemas. There will be, you can see in the agenda that you have printed out, any additional information that you want, details around the slot messages, you can reference in the document there. Okay. So are there any questions on any of the work on any of the groups within the PSB or anything on the PSB level itself? I mean, we do have a lot of groups, a lot of activities. We do encourage your people at your airlines to become involved, to work with us, join in development. There's always a lot going on. We can always use a lot of the other help, and I think we'll be looking forward to the migration of the integration with the plan board, with the shop board, to see how we're going to try to support each other moving forward to support our goals in the end. Any questions? Michelle,
please.
Thank you. Thanks, Glenn. I just have, it might be a silly question. Do you have any information about, you mentioned that in the slot messaging group, you are looking at the rise of electric vehicles. Do you have any information about what you're doing on that?
We'd have to go back to the slot group and look for specifics. I don't have anything in that, but yeah, it's the electric vehicles are going to be, I mean, in my opinion, it's going to be very interesting because there's not a lot out there on exactly how they're going to be implemented. Is, to me, whether this is going to be driven by the cities that offer the services or the carriers themselves. From the IATA perspective, there may not be a lot of effort to actually put out a business plan.
Okay. No, one of the reasons why I ask is, and I don't even know if this would come with under the this whole topic, is that I was approached right before the pandemic when we had a meeting in Dubai for the passengers with reduced mobility, and there is a group out there that has an electric vehicle that they are looking to place in different airports. So I was just curious if maybe that was also included.
I think that's probably something that would come up under the SPG to look at, the publication group. And that may come in whether any of these bilateral DEIs, some type of information, because I think when we're looking at the electric vehicles, we're looking at the air taxi types.
Oh, okay.
So I think you're looking at more like the electric vehicles when you talk about the limited mobility passengers.
Yes.
That's probably a good topic to be addressed for us to take a look at if there's any questions.
Okay. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any more questions for the PSB? No. If there are no questions, feel free to also use the email address that Natasha sent if you have a question later on any of the topics, especially before you vote. Otherwise, thank you very much, Glenn, Sanda, and Isabella, for the time and your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to start with the next section of our agenda, which is the shop order standard board items. And for that, I would ask the SOSB members, which are Nathan, Jerry and Yonut. I believe Nathan is unable to be there today. So then, Jerry, floor is yours.
Thank you, Nobu. Yes, Nathan made some, pathetic excuse that it's 3 o'clock in the morning and really not very convenient for him. But I think he's actually really celebrating Australia's success in the World Cup and was probably out celebrating until 3 o'clock in the morning. So as a result of that, you've got Jerry. So can we move to the next slide? So very similar order, as Dave said, all of these reports are going to follow, board reports are going to follow a similar order. So we'll just move straight to the next slide. Okay, so in terms of 2022, like other boards and working groups, we've been affected significantly by not being able to meet face-to-face. So we've had calls, and most recently we have had a couple of face-to-face meetings, as stated there. Big issue for us has been the implementation guidance for 21.3 NDC, as we've had a lot of challenges in getting that done. At our most recent meeting, we have agreed a way forward, which includes working much closer with ATPCO in terms of getting their support to help provide this documentation, which is a very pleasing move forward for both IATA and ATPCO and the industry. We've talked about things that have already been mentioned, including identity management, and we've talked about the restructuring proposals. Next year, clearly it's a big focus to move forward in terms of our retailing capability, and also to bed in this restructure that's been mentioned. So we could go to the next one. As Glenn said, with his board, the existing plan board for the shop order board, these are the voting members and airlines represented, and exactly the same as for Plan Standard Board. We're going to continue, we're going to ask for this to be the conference to endorse continuation of the current board until we move to the new board structure, when new members or new voting members will then be elected. Next slide, which is that delegation of authority, again exactly the same as plan standards. We seek the same delegation of authority to the shop order board to be able to deal with a number of issues, many of which are just ongoing or business as usual types. Again, very similar to what Glenn was referring to. So business as usual there. So go to the next slide. Oh, content sharing has ended.
Apologies for that. I'll get back there very quickly.
I won't take it personally.
Sorry. My screen just shut.
It will be page 79.
What's the one before that?
Is it on your screen?
Yeah. So keep going.
There we go.
Okay. So under the shop order board currently, we have the advisory forum where we meet together with the agency groups and the GDSs and other suppliers and partners, and then we have the offer and order working group, the integration working group, the pricing working group, the ticketing working group, and the reservations group. Next slide. So for the ticketing group, brilliantly run by Margaret and Michael, or Cal, looked at a number of things during the last year, even with the inability to meet on a face-to-face basis very often. I'm not going to go through them all, partly because I couldn't go through them all even if I wished to. The obvious ones that will mean something to most of you. A lot of work had to be done during COVID on giving further capability and making EMDs easier to transact to support all of the new processes that were invented during COVID. And some work done also on involuntary changes, so making it clearer how this is to work between the different players when this happens. For 2023, again, this is related to running out of numbers for everything, including tickets, and the possible combination of date of issue being used to further extend the range that are available to us. Other main one there, more work on planned schedule change. We already have a recommended practice, so there's more work to be done on that. And again, form code impact analysis, which has been mentioned already. So we go to the next one. So the of those in the ballot, and more detail is there. You can find it, and this is about bringing everything up to date. This is to do with ZMIVA or staff travel related issues. So next one. Currency. We have an issue with some currencies where there just isn't enough space in the box to put the fare or the total cost, and therefore this is about where required, giving the ability to use the actual currency code field where more digits are required than are actually available. But again, more detail is in the details that have already been sent out to you, which you can see online. Next slide. So reservations group run by Rick and Michelle. They continue to have bi-monthly calls, and the work of the group has continued with no face-to-face meetings, as with all the other groups. The reference there is to the SSR code, the new SSR code, EMRG, to identify those customers that are travelling as the result of an emergency incident. But we'll come to, I think it's covered on the next slide. Yes, so the issuance of this new SSR code is in the package to be voted on, where we're not dealing with how much airlines should pay or anything like that, or any other details. We have created this code so it can be clear to other airlines where they're carrying someone who is being sent or is travelling due to an accident of that particular airline. So that's in the voting package. Next. So offer and order group, again, well, for various reasons. One, as it states at the top there, we've been without a secretary role. We have restarted activities, as it says there. Implementation guidance, I've already mentioned that. There's been a focus, 21.3. Getting that guidance completed and sent out is a definite focus. Lots of talk about backwards compatibility. What we're going to do about 21.3 going forward in terms of the backlog of features and capabilities. Interaction with the Interline group, as Florian said. All of the boards will need to interact with Interline, as that's what brings us all together in the first place. And I think those are the main points on that one. So we carry on to the next one. Pricing automation group, again, hit by lack of face-to-face meetings, but a number of things have been done via remote meetings and the rest, and they're all listed there, including bits about city codes and airport codes, and to get an alignment for the usage of these, as stated there in the resolution, and work on MPM and TPM, so ticket point mileage, and how that's to be used with reference to the difference between city codes and airport codes in fair construction, and whether it's going to be possible to create these in a more automated way as we move forward. Next. The integration group really hasn't met because of the crisis, so there's nothing specific coming out of that group in 2022, but for 2023, when it's reconvened, it will be working on a number of themes. These themes are included in other bits of the working group, but we have the integration group alongside to try and bring these things together. Next slide. So you can see that's it. So we're obviously not doing anywhere near the amount of work that Glenn's doing in the Plan Standards Board, but I look forward to working with Glenn or those of us that go forward from the offer part of offer and order, which will merge with Plan. Look forward to dealing with some of the issues and questions that Glenn has already raised, and I just to say in closing, before there are any questions, that I do support the change to the new structure, as Nobu took us through it earlier. In my view, there is no perfect solution to how it should be structured going forward, and if it needs to change, then it can be changed, but I do support the fact that we do need to change the structure of the boards as suggested in order to move quicker and give the airlines, or give the airline industry, what it requires, which is a much better retailing structure than we have today. So I'll stop there, and if you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Oh, sorry, my microphone's been off. Thank you very much, Jerry. Are there any questions? No questions? Then thank you. Oh, anyone? No? Okay, well then, thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you very much for the entire SOSB group and all the working groups, and then we will move on to the next topic, the D series, which are the travel standards topics. And here I'd like to introduce Edwin, Harry, and Louise.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Respecting that we have a tight schedule, and what we'll do is we'll take this opportunity to quickly go over the important updates related to the Travel Standards Board, as well as highlight pertinent points associated with the several groups working under the board, and highlight the items that have tabled for endorsement, as well as the voting items. First and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to present. This is my first Passenger Standards Conference, so I'll try my best to inform everyone of TSB's current state of affairs, as well as its planned activities for the upcoming year. I'm actually accompanied by Louise Cole, my colleague, who is head of customer experience and facilitation, and unfortunately for me, has been the interim secretary prior to me joining IATA, and we'll be speaking about some of our initiatives along with myself, in particular, those associated with OneID.
you've gone on mute, Harry.
Sorry, my apologies. I don't know where I cut off, but for those that don't know me, my name's Harry
Oh no,
Graywell.
we got that. Good.
Okay. And I've just recently joined IATA as its Director of Airport Infrastructure and Customer Experience. And I'll be assuming the role of Secretary for the TSB. And I'm looking forward to contributing to the board. For some reason, I'm getting technical. Sorry, folks, I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. It just keeps on muting. Hopefully it stops.
I can pick up there if need be.
Yeah, Louise, could you please?
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Harry. Unfortunately, we've had this afternoon very apologies from Edwin. He had been prepared to join the conference today, and unfortunately, something has come up, and we are in the position of currently having the vice chair position vacant. So you have the IATA folk today, and as Harry has joined, I've been the interim secretary for the last few months for the Travel Standards Board. It's also my first PSC, so please bear with us as we work through the report. The activity has resumed this year, including one face-to-face meeting, and there's been a lot of work and a lot of discussion, a lot of which is reflected in the PSC evolution work and the similar situation as we've seen from the other boards. There's been a big focus under the Travel Standards Board this year on the acceleration of the 1ID program into delivering standards. And we'll talk a little bit more about that under the 1ID working group, but that has been a particular area that a lot of activity has occurred in this year, as well as in many of the other groups as we go through their reports. Next, please, Natasha. For the next year, the board are keen, allowing for the vote, of course, for resolution A9.1, but the board will be meeting for a 3-day meeting with a strong focus on the strategy, on the evolution, on the governance and agile governance, and looking at improving that standard setting process and looking to be able to really better define work under the board and have the better transversal work across the groups and across the boards, and having the opportunity to restructure and consider the governance under the board, as we've heard really from most boards so far today, which is heartening. Next slide, please. The issues that we'd been experiencing under the Travel Standards Board were this very, very clear lack of the definition of just what is a service to a customer, just what is the product or the service to the customer. And we believe that this is one of the ways to define the scope moving forward in the work on the evolution. We've also seen and discussed at length this lack of consistency on the scope and on the approach. And we've found particular challenges in participation and consistent leadership. We've got vacancies in a few groups in the chair positions and vice chair positions, and airline participation in the working groups can vary greatly. And it is something that we are hoping to address through this evolution. There's also concern that in those situations where the airline participation is lower, there's concern that who is asking for this work to be done, who needs this work to be done, particularly in the groups where the solution providers' participation is high. And that's something that we're looking forward to tackling at the next meeting scheduled in January. Next slide, please. This is the yellow slide, so the voting slide, and we're really asking the conference to endorse the continuation of the current board until we work through the transition pending the outcome of a 9.1. And again, I'm noting the vice chair vacancy. We really would like to see support, and thank you to the chairperson of the PSC for raising that at the beginning of the call today as well. Next slide, thanks, Natasha. The delegation of authority for the online ballot voting item PSC 2002 D3. We're asking also for the endorsement here and the comprehensive details in the report that in the agenda. Thank you, Natasha. And this is a D3.1, the delegation of authority for ground ops standards and ground ops automation and digitization. We'll have to have the delegated authority from the Travel Standards Board to approve the recommended practices and to approve the continued development, enhancement, and etc. under the Airport Handling Manual and the Ground Operations Manual. There is a proposal, a very detailed proposal that is included in the agenda that walks through the changes and why the changes are there and what the benefit of those changes are. And I do have a couple of slides on that also. So next, we're asking the conference to endorse this delegation in the vote. Thank you, Natasha. On to the report from the Ground Operations Working Group. Significant activity this year from within this group. There's been considerable. I won't read through all of the items. I'm aware of the time. I thought the best way was to focus on the points that were perhaps stood out in particular, and that's the changes within and the simplifications within the IGOM and the platform also. There is a number of changes that have been made, new structure and layout, and opportunities too within the platform for the way in which members can or handlers can assess against the checklists and the work underway also in training. I think for me another standout area was in the safety and the work on the awareness campaign for safety. The report, as I said, is good to refer to there. Next slide, please. Just on the proposed governance structure, this is to, while still having the dotted line in place to the OAG, to really simplify and bring things under the Travel Standards Board and simplify the standard setting process considerably as a consequence. And on the next slide, I think we talk through a little bit more about what's involved there so that under the TSB, we can have approval for the changes in the Airport Handling Manual and the IGOM and the BRM and the annual report that's provided to the Travel Standards Board and to this conference. And the PSC continues as per current approval processes for resolutions and for RPs. Some of the benefits within this will be really consolidating that work and having the visibility and separating out the actual development work from the strategy setting, etc., and streamline. Another benefit I see in there that's not on the slide is really the reduction in the duplication of effort. Duplication of effort not just on the side of the IATA as the secretary there, but duplication of effort from the airlines who often sit within both groups, and there's dual governance processes and dual duplication of effort at all levels, and so it's far more streamlined and agile approach that I hope will be endorsed. Next slide, please. And moving in now to the groups active under the Travel Standards Board. There, this will definitely be up for review as part of the change. in order to ensure that we are fit for purpose and focused on what's important. There has been some experimentation under some of these groups to start to consider as to what it might look like in the future. There's also endorsed by this conference and steering group committee in November, the Electronic Mobility Aids Tag Working Group, a very important area under facilitation and accessibility, with strong links in with our advocacy and external affairs also, and something well overdue. So while this has not been formalised as yet, that is something that will be considered in the work that we're doing in the review of the structure and how we best serve the urgent need for the development of those standards. Next slide, please. A baggage steering group. This has been very consistent throughout the year with the meetings. They'll be having their first face-to-face meeting very soon, and work has continued with the manual and the message implementation guidelines, etc. But perhaps most significantly has been to restart the baggage working group, which had been inactive, and begin to start identifying the priorities. We know that we saw in the recently released Global Passenger Survey from IATA, one of the lowest satisfaction areas was in baggage, and as most have experienced over the summer, particularly in Europe with different disruptions, we are keen to ensure that this is an area well supported to improve things for all involved. Next slide, please, Natasha. The baggage working group, I think I've jumped ahead of myself there. This is the restart, and they will be looking at developing that strategy. There's a number of hot topics. I think the contactless baggage is a particularly hot topic, and that is definitely in the 2023 work plan. Next slide, thank you. Departure control. This group has not met. There hasn't been a recommendation as such to discontinue or to stand down this working group. It was a consideration, however, given that we are going to undertake that thorough review, thought it best to leave it there, and because we still do need to consider the activities that and the responsibilities that sit under that current working group and where that fits in the new structure that's developed. Next slide, please. Common Use Working Group, again, a long-standing and very active group, but one that will benefit from looking against the new Agile governance because it is a highly structured group right now, working on a number of different legacy artifacts and new developing artifacts also. The Common Use Self-Service 2.0, it was initially expected for the implementation for the 1st of January 2023. That has pushed out, but it is expected to be delivered in 2023 for CUS 2.0. Work has just kicked off under the Common Use Web Services on the development of the API for access to security screening, which will model that of boarding, and the has a few more complexities in it, but it will model boarding. And the other interesting experiment, I guess, has been a transversal approach with the One ID working group to form a task force to begin to look at connecting the business requirements to the technical solutions and what API development might be needed in web services in the back end in the airport to make it all work once the data gets to the system and follows the passenger through the airport touch points. Next slide, please. Facilitation working group. Now, the facilitation group itself is another to be considered in the restructure. It has not met in all of 2022, and I believe from my predecessors it hadn't occurred in 2021 either. So that is a consideration as to how this particular, really the subgroups from the facilitation group, what their governance line is. However, for those subgroups, they have all been very active, given the topic of facilitation, some very so during the COVID times. PAXLIST and PNR Gov can continue their very hard work in the revision of the PAXLIST and the API best practice, the APIS data best practices, and PNR Gov on the open standard comms protocols and the best practices and the formatting changes on SSRs. Next slide, please. The Control Authorities Working Group, also an incredibly active group, has taken the approach of task forces for deliverables of items in order to not set up permanent subgroups and ever extend the governance line, which has been a useful experiment in planning for the restructure work. They have been leading the work on the best practice guidelines for the interactive APIS. And this is the COG is a member airline and government only working group as well. The other, they've also had a transversal group task force formed with members from the OneID working group to begin to look at the legislative and regulatory framework that would hinder or prevent or roadblock implementations of digital identity, OneID, biometric solutions in the facilitation process, so that in parallel we can ensure we have advocacy plans to support that. And the work in the past couple of years on the digital health platform, which did result in a paper to ICAO also. They will continue in the that task force won't continue into 2023, but they will continue working on guidance around inadmissible passengers and document checking and in the areas of data quality. Next slide, please. The OneID working group, as I said, this was restarted at the beginning of this year, really with some urgency from the Travel Standards Board final meeting of 2021 to restart this work, to knowing that things weren't going to be sustainable if we returned to 2019 levels with the current difficulties in the document checking area. And so the traditional way of viewing OneID has changed somewhat into breaking it down into manageable pieces. And the first was seen as the digitalization of admissibility. The best way to understand this is probably the digitalization of document checking, the full automation of document checking, using the digital identity technologies to create credentials in a digital wallet that can be sent as part of an online or web check-in process, so that not only the passport but visas and ESTAs and any health certificates that could be required, etc., can all be checked electronically and in an automated fashion, and allowing the passenger to have a fully complete board and not present all of those documents when they arrive at the airport again and again and again. The second part, the second work being worked on, is the contactless travel component. That is the RP for the first RP was completed, of course, by and endorsed by yourselves, but the contactless travel one is in the final stages and will be sent to the Travel Standards Board before this year is out. This work will continue with some, again, with some focus and intensity throughout 2023. So you can expect to see this item on the agenda more frequently in the next year or two. Next slide, please. The ADEX, again, a lot of activity in the ADEX area. another hardworking group. A lot of activity this year. There's ADEX survey, etc., and publishing the ADEX, the latest ADEX implementation guidelines. 2023 activities continue in that alignment of the ADEX standard with the AIDM and modelling all of the ADEX data elements attributed in. So a lot of work there in order to be able to undertake that data modelling. And once that's done, the ADEX and JSON and API standard will begin in earnest. And I do believe our chairperson has just joined. Edwin, hello.
Yes, I totally apologize. I've been in and out, but have been dealing with, as you all know, we had an incident in Lima last week, and I had a couple of items to attend regarding that. Okay, so I do apologize, but go ahead, Louise, and I'll just catch up with you here. Okay.
Okay, thank you. The publishing the ADEX standard and the airport handling manual also. Next slide, please. The Fuel Data Standards Group. They have continued again meeting, and they've finalised their review of the recommended practice on CO2 calculation and added the fuel quality messages into the transaction schema. 2023, their work plan will include the updating the code sets and improving the tender bid schema, and maintenance work within the full schemas for the transaction messages to transaction schema, and also to resume the work on the implementation guides. Next slide. A ground operations, automation and digitization group. I'm glad I can call that GAD, it's a mouthful. Their activities this year have been around the timestamps on turnaround and the XML schema. They've had a series of webinars to promote the implementation of the new codes, and also have published the implementation guidelines for the digital load control aircraft data, and that has been published. The publication is update for the airport handling manual in the 43rd edition for the digital messages. Next slide, please. And the GSE and the automation team, the use case report has been finalised for the ground damage and the enhanced GSE, and the CO2 noise emissions reduction model has been finalised and published. The best practices for autonomous vehicles and mobility point-to-point published, and the GSE standard maintenance checklist published. And I do believe that might be it, Natasha. Yes. Thank you, and thank you all. I apologise that we weren't able to go deeper into some of those items, and I feel like I did rush through quite quickly, but thank you. And are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you very much, Louise, for stepping in, and welcome, Edwin.
Yes, if I may take just a minute or two, if that's okay, Nobu. I just wanted to chime in. Thank you very much, Louise, for the last minute changes here. But definitely tremendous work that the board has done over the course of this year. Louise and Harry are just stepping into the role, so they're catching up with all the work that's ongoing, and actually it's a very good time to get into the role, since we are starting our high prioritization, right, of the items and the objectives that we have for transition into next year. And 2023, I think we're going to have a very, very full year with a lot of changes and a lot of different things that the travel board is going to have to be focused on, and certainly work across the aisles here with all the other boards to ensure that we we reach all the milestones that we have outlined.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Nobu.
Are there any questions? We're all quiet on questions today. No? If there's not, thank you very much, Edwin, Louise, and Harry. And we will move on to the E series, which is the Pay Account Standard Board items. And I do believe, Miriam, were you able to join?
Yes, finally I made it.
Okay, so
technology was challenging today.
Okay, so we'll introduce Miriam, Jerome, Altug. Yeah, floor is yours.
Thank you, Nobu. So we will have a quick overview on some voting items and also a quick insight into the different works done by the different groups. You can go to the next slide just to present the structure, the next one. As you can see on the Pay Account Standard Boards, we have a variety and a broad range of finance-related topics such as payments, accounting, settlement, and taxes. All those topics belong to finance, and finance was quite challenging during the crisis and also after the crisis or in the last year. So the work and the activities were also limited. I will mention this later. If we can go into the activities, maybe. So we had 6 conference calls as a board and no face-to-face, unfortunately. Beside the endorsement of proposals from the various groups, the changes with the resolution 009 has been presented and discussed. We got a positive feedback as the finance community really feels the pressure and the need to work on the future standards. So we are keen to start this work next year under the new governance. We also welcomed a new working group, the Aligned Bill and Settlement working group. This group used to be under the FINAC, so on the financial side, working on the revenue accounting manual updates and specifically on interline billing matters. The focus of this group under the PSC will be to review the interline standards that will be needed for accounting and finance in the future. Other items on which the board and the groups have been working are listed in the 2 slides here, and I will not go into all the details. They are also included in the agenda if you would like to review, and if you have any question, please directly raise your questions to the related group secretaries or myself or Altug or Jerome, and we will be happy to take the questions. So we can go straight to the rescission of IATA resolutions and recommended practices. The PASB discussed this topic and decided on the last call on the 10th of November to put our recommendation to the SOSB. The SOSB has noted this recommendation, and this is now included in a ballot of SOSB. We can go to the work plan. So for the work plan, this is quite generic. It's listed here and also included in the agenda. And as any other board, we will focus on the requirements for the future. We will give some guideline to the current working groups and align the priorities with the PSC steering group. Implementation guidance is on the agenda, as well as needed RAM or DISH revisions where necessary. As RAM and DISH are related to old standards, we will try to put the minimum of efforts on these, but rather focus on future accounting and finance topics. We expect further ballot items coming specifically from the order accounting working group and order payment working group. That we will, of course, review and endorse for the next year's PSC ballots. And also here, if you have any question on the work plan or any suggestion, proposal, please do not hesitate to contact any of us. We can go over the work plan 1 and 2. Then we have the endorsement. Next, please. Natasha, endorsement of the PASB members. As for the other boards, we have this ballot item, which will be on the 4th voting cycle. I understood we would like to ask conference to endorse the current board until the transition, as per the agenda A9.1 about the new governance and structure. You can see the delegates. So if you have any topics for finance, you are welcome also to contact your delegates in this board. We have another voting item. This ballot voting item is to ask for the official delegation of authority to the PASB on the listed APIs. I just would like also to highlight that the PSC has approved this delegation of authority since 2020, when these APIs went live. These APIs are very important from a financial point of view, as by using those APIs, in new distribution, airlines make sure they only connect to a seller, which is also an accredited seller, or to a seller who is able to pay, and also potentially avoid to connect to a fraudster, which some of us might have experienced in the past. API 2 is also ensuring the completeness of data monitored by IATA for risk management purposes. So I would also like to stress distribution colleagues to look at these APIs. It's all documented on the websites, and take into consideration these implementation of these APIs in their distribution flows. Then we can go to the next. So some of the highlights from the different groups, without going into many details. As already mentioned, we are currently onboarding the new airline billing and settlement working group, looking at interline processes. To start with, we have planned and started with like a training plan on sessions on new distribution, on enhanced distribution standards, on messaging, and on how PSC works. For the two next groups, the order payment group and the order accounting group, unfortunately, we lost the secretary of the two groups. But we have now new secretaries, and the work will continue again and will be resumed. The tax governance group had their first call in September. That was also resumed. The BDISG, which is focusing more on DISH standards, has been kind of paused due to no topics to be discussed. There were no change requests to the DISH standards, which is a good sign also. The settlement of order group, which has provided a major standard last year already for settlement with sellers, has also been put on hold as well, as we now wait for more adopters and their feedback to work again on standards and possible improvements. There might be some work for this group in the future if settlement with order could be a solution for interlining, for example, and this will be taken up next year in the future work plan. More details are enclosed in the agenda also, and if you have any question, we are happy to take them here now, or you might address them to the secretaries, to Altug or myself, Jerome. Are there any questions, comments, suggestions?
No? Are there any questions for the board groups? If there is no, then thank you very much, Miriam, Jerome, Altug.
Thank you, Nobu.
And we'll move on to the next item, which is the F series, and that's architecture and technology strategy topics. And welcome Michelle, Nashmi, and Crystal. It's yours.
Yes, hello. So thanks, Nobu. I think that Najmi is not there, and, so I will take the presentation of the activities of the ATSB. Maybe next slide. Yeah, so the same agenda as all the other boards. Maybe next slide with an overview and then a zoom in each groups. So going through the activities of the ATSB this year. Yes, just a reminder that at board level, the organization is quite okay. Now we have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary, so it's good for us. So as planned, in fact, we have maintained the agile quarterly data exchange standard release framework. So 4 releases were done this year, and latest one was submitted yesterday for voting. So it's still the same pace as usual. The board has prepared also for agility and focus on the future to provide standards and guidance based on best practices and technology standards applicable to airline industry, like open APIs and digital identities. We also made some consolidation in the working groups, so we will see that just after. To comply with this target and to optimize by reducing the administration part within the groups. Yes, you can see the endorsement of the second version of OpenAir API standards and an updated version of the AIDM methodology. Global remark for this year is that the release was quite small, with no new content, but more updates or changes. So the work plan for next year is to continue with the support and guidance and provide the technical capability to move away from legacy messaging. So we will focus on open API and identity management. And especially for next year with the new technical working groups that will take place within the different boards, and we will be able to maybe to better interact, to provide support and guidance within the different boards. So maybe next slide. Yeah, so here is the voting members of the group. So we are also asking for the endorsement of the PSC for the continuation of the current board as per the agenda item. So next slide, yes. Delegation authority, I don't know. Yes, maybe. Okay, so going to the groups that are active currently under the ATSB. So you see that there has been a simplification of the groups. So the EDIFACT group is now merged into the change management group, and to be more focused, less focused on EDIFACT and more on the future. The identity management group remain unchanged, and the technology group has been repurposed with the Open API technology group. Okay, so going to the different groups and their activities, I will do the presentation. So yes, the remark is that for the change management group, we have a chair and a vice chair, so it's good also. So 4 releases done this year for the data exchange standards, but so as I said, quite small ones, no new messages, but only updates. The working group is currently working with the AIDX group to converge on AIDM standard, and it's not so easy changing the existing model and data. And yes, also supporting the business modeling for the ground operational and identity initiatives. And the group has also developed best practices for backward compatibility. So mainly for offer and order and in collaboration with other groups. So so maybe about the work plan for next year. So the work plan is to continue on providing support and guidance and ensure that the release are consistent. Yes, for the next year. So the activity of the group, in fact, yeah, there is a list of the topic for next year, but it's really linked to the activities of the other groups in the different boards. And so it will depend on their plan also. The group will help with the implementation of the standards and the consistency and backward compatibility of the changes. The first activities you see there are coming from the other group of the ATSB, so the other working groups, but because they will get support like just the other board. That's all for the change management group. Yeah, maybe going to the identity management group. So a remark is that here we have a vice chair, but no chair, so it's not complete. There the target is mainly to apply the recognized standards in identity management to the airline industry and to define future airline standards and provide implementation and guidance. The plan for next year is to provide some technical implementation based on airline industry use cases. So you see on passenger and on distribution. Next slide, maybe with the work plan for the group. So as you see, the plan is to investigate feasibility and value of using the digital identity and verified credential, first focusing on B2B use case. So how to use these standards at the enterprise level and then extending also to the B2C use case. Okay, next slide with the Open API working group. So the group is having a chair and a vice chair. The group, so it was repurposed this year to focus on industry Open API and how to help also like other groups in the ATSB, how to help on providing guidance and adopting the standards within the airlines. So the activity of the group is to help the deployment of Open API standards within airlines. So it's the other groups will provide guidance, support, but a very important thing is the development of a JSON schema library for the airline that will provide that will support the airline JSON APIs implementation. So I think it will be an important achievement. It's started this year and it will be provided next year. Yes, and maybe for the work plan, yes, what you see in the work plan is about this library of JSON schema. And next to that, you will have also an Open API hub where airlines and providers will be able to publish their APIs, and that will contribute a lot to the improvement of the standard adoption, but also their definition, in fact, being able to learn from the airlines API, from the existing APIs. So I think these two parts are quite important. I think that's all for the ATSB. Yes. Questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle. Are there any questions for the ATSB colleagues? No? No questions. Then thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Christoph. And yeah, we will move on to the next item, which are the information items. I think that will be done by, will be Dave.
Thank you. As is the tradition, we have a number of information-only items. They are annotated there and are published as part of the agenda. I encourage you to read the detail. We're not going to get into it right now. And if you have any questions on any of the content that you read in those reports, as always, you're welcome to contact any of the standards team.
All right. Are there any immediate questions on these? No, if there isn't, then we will move on to, well, we will actually revert back to some of the things that we say for the end, which is any other business. Dave, do we have any other business?
So far, there has been no AOB indicated to me, either in the chat, privately or on email, unless there is any other business from the floor today that they would like to talk about.
Right. Are there any last minute items that people would like to bring? No? Okay, then we move on to the next item, which is the date and place of next meeting. Dave, what are some suggestions or thoughts?
Okay, so the first thing is we'll deal with the date. Exceptionally this year, we were pushed to this particular date in December because of some of the challenges that we've had around resourcing and the agenda is not fully formed until now. We are hopeful that we can go back to our normal time next year, which is October. So we'll try and keep to that. And as far as the place, as Nobu, you referenced in your introduction, we've not had a face-to-face meeting now for some considerable time. It would seem that people are keen on getting authorities to travel more and more. And we are hopeful that things will be stabilized enough to actually have a face-to-face meeting in 2023. And we welcome comments and suggestions from everybody on the call as to whether or not you will consider traveling to that event. One of the ideas that we have, which is really kind of useful, is to align the face-to-face meeting with one of our events, which would be possibly the WFS or WPS or the next iteration, which might be some amalgamation next year of the two. Although I cannot reveal the location because it hasn't been fully firmed up yet. What I can say, in all likelihood, it would be somewhere in Europe, in which case we can combine with that and co-locate. Maybe there's even an opportunity to have some face-to-face boards and advisory fora attached to that. Mm-hmm. Alternatively, as always, we have a huge conference facility here in Geneva. I will work with the PSC steering group to try and lock in a date so that I can block that for our calendar. And the minute that I know when the dates of the events are and where, then of course we will discuss it with the steering group and let everybody know as soon as we possibly can.
All right, thank you very much. And as I said, I would really, really look forward and welcome the opportunity to see you actually face-to-face, in person. And yeah, let's try to plan that early as possible. Any thoughts or comments? I do see a few comments, so if there are additional comments, please submit it, chat or in email, which actually brings us to, Natasha, the end, closing remarks. So once again, thank you very much for your time and participating in webinar. As I said, we would very much like to have it as face-to-face, but under the circumstances, I think this was the best course of action. I would really encourage, and it's one of our goals in our proposal to change the restructure the PSC. We would very much like your participation. And personally, today we have about 80 to 90 airlines participated, and I do have one personal request to you. Your participation is very important. And if there are working groups or board topics where you or the participants are not unsure whether you have a knowledge or you feel comfortable participate in it, I do encourage you to participate. Maybe that's a big learning opportunity for you. I can speak that for myself. 25 years ago, I was sent to, as a young Nobu Yamanuchi, was sent to a few working groups. I felt like I was in another planet. I didn't understand the language, but I did learn. Look, where I am. So if you're not certain, if you're unsure about participation, please do. Please do, and take it as a learning opportunity. And I think that will be very, very important for you and your staff. That being a closing remark, I'd like to thank everyone, Dave, Natasha, and my vice chair who wasn't able to attend today, James, and all of the steering group members for making this possible, and the agenda and in particular the agenda item 9.1 on the restructuring. Thank you very much. And yeah, Dave,
may I?
Are there any additional words?
Yeah, and if I may add to that, Nobu, thank you for your kind words. Allow me, if I may, to add my personal thanks and IATA's thanks to you, my PSC steering group. I know we've put a lot of work on you during the year, and to bring this to a conclusion, it was an amazing piece of work. So thank you to you, Nobu and James, and all of the chairs and vice chairs for supporting this initiative. And together with all of the participants and contributors to all of the boards, all of the secretaries, the IATA team, and all of the people that have contributed to the working groups, a massive, massive thank you. We can't do this work without each and every one of you, and I echo Nobu's sentiments. We are embarking on a massive transformation agenda. It's a huge, exciting agenda, bigger than anything we've ever done before, and we invite you all to be part of the journey together. So all that remains for me to do is to wish you happy holidays as they come around for those that can, and we look forward to working with all of you in 2023. A huge thank you to each and every one of you.
Okay. Thank you. And then we did note the question coming in the end. So Natasha will follow up with that. And in case, please send it to the email address provided, and wish you a good holiday period.
It seems there's a question on A9. Do we want to address it?
We could address that. Let me just have a look. A9 again. Will IATA revert with a list of all standards that are affected by A4A reference withdrawal? Dave, I think.
Yes. We've already touched base with Margaret Brown, who is or was the chairman of the A4A Passenger Processing Council, the sister conference on the A4A side that no longer sits. And we have come up with a plan to review all of the resolutions, to look at all of the A4A references and make a proposal as to what we will do with them. Some of them may need removing, some of them can stay because they're quite benign. But what we're really keen to kind of resolve relatively quickly, perhaps in the first quarter of next year, is to ensure that everybody understands that where we currently publish joint standards, they can no longer be joint standards because A4A no longer actually sits to endorse them. So we will get back to you in the first quarter of next year, having worked with Margaret and the Secretariat team to see just exactly what the strategy will be to tidy up the resolutions and texts and products and services that we offer with A4A as part of those joint activities. So the simple answer is yes, we'll get back to you on that.
All right. Thank you very much. And have a nice holiday period, and we'll see each other in New Year. Bye. And don't forget to vote.
Exactly. And participate.
And participation. All right. Bye.
And we saved 8 minutes.
Well done. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.